Hello everyone, my name is Talisman Skulls. I'd like to propose a hypothesis that seems to make a lot more sense than a lot of the ET, alien bug, and all the associations with misinterpretations of Sumerian history or mythology. I'd like to also point out that the Sumerians called themselves the Igigi, or Igigi, which is spelled I-G-I-G-I, more or less, depending on which source you get. In any case, when you look at the word Anunnaki, it means of heaven and earth, not from heaven to earth came and all the other crap that's been thrown out there. It was a title for royalty. Not all that unlike when you look into references to Japanese emperors and other cultures in China and also that refer to their rulers as sons or daughters of heaven and earth. There are a lot of cultures that make those type of statements. They also believe that the stars were the souls of their ancestors, so they would always make references to their ancestors and their rulers ascending to the stars. Or if stars were seen as falling stars, they would think that they were coming back to the earth. In any case, I'd like to put some things into perspective. This is my hypothesis. Share your thoughts on this if you'd like. My view is that the Anunnaki, the royal class more or less, would not be all that unsimilar to the Brahmins that were a combination of priest kings, and that they essentially had this structured, stratified society. They also had enforcers referred to as the Galu, or Galas, or all these other various terms that actually mean storms. It was also a metaphoric term for the warrior class, who served as the enforcers for the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, through their Galu as warlords, more or less conquered the Igigi, put them to work, and took labors off themselves, which is part of how they established their kingdom. Not a big shock, there's a lot of ancient societies with that history. And aliens aren't involved. In time, the Igigi get sick of being oppressed, and they basically go on a worker strike and say, F you! And they burn all their gear and basically tell the enforcers, fine, kill us, do it, whatever you want to us, because we refuse to give all of our goods, our services, and everything else to a bunch of rich, fat cats sitting on their butts, taking everything from us while they throw us the scraps. Sounds like modern day economics to me. In any case, a bargain basically gets struck up, and they decide, okay, well, we're going to do something else. We will put you, Igigi, as the landlords, and you bring in workers, and we'll send the Galu to enforce the labor and everything else. So what do? They go over to Edom, where the name Adam comes from anyway, and if you actually look how things were spelled back then, a lot of the times the letter E is actually spelled with an A. Not a big mystery. So what happens? They go over, they conquer and take over the Adamu, which is the name from which Adam has actually come from, and is actually a plural word, as a people from Edom, or Edom, or Adam, which is also translated later on as a mistranslation as Eden. So, what happens? Eden was originally their own private little place, their own little culture that was basically conquered and taken over. So, the so-called rebellion basically results where, again, people get sick of the imposed enforcement on them. Eventually, the Galu themselves overthrow the Anunnaki and become the new warlords. But the Igigi go to war with them, and this time they're defeated. So they're not prepared for this. So there's a whole bunch of internal conflicts going on. And as a result, Edom, in the whole situation with whatever all the Sumerians had under their control at the time, from all the infighting, eventually implodes on itself. Sends people wandering. The Adamu leave Edom, and they go traveling to the desert, trying to survive. The different fragmented people again, after this civilization falls apart, go to other regions where some of the information gets shared, some of the mythology, some of the legends, worship of the ancestors, you name it like that. It spreads to other cultures, which they then take that information, which then brings those civilizations up over time, like Egypt and the rest of Mesopotamia and everything else. The Adamu, a branch of them, eventually becomes basically called the Habaru, which didn't actually mean bandits or raiders, but actually had the term meaning the nomadic people, who basically assimilated a life of travel, no longer calling any place their particular home, partly as a tradition of mourning the loss of Edom, or Adam. So, long story short, the Habaru become later referred to as the Hebrew, made up of multiple ethnicities, not just one, and isn't particularly Jewish or Semitic, but made up of the same bloodlines as Egyptians, Akkadians, and everything else. We already know that all these people are multicultural, multi-ethnic throughout the Middle East, including in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, you name it, right down to the Tarim mummies found over in China. And we already know, again, multi-ethnic cultural history, though politicians later on like to screw it up and suit their own nationalistic rewrites to try and glorify themselves. That's nothing new. Modern politicians do that crap all the time. So basically what you really have is a story of the fall of an ancient empire, conquest as the norm, and the same caste system just happened to survive the longest in places like India. No aliens involved. As far as where the Sumerians themselves refer to as where they came from, it wasn't from space. In fact, they refer to the Anunnaki actually coming from the more northern regions, and that they didn't even come to those lands until those regions got frozen around 10,000 BC, which marks about the period of the Ice Age. And in fact, if you pay closer attention to their descriptions, most of it leads them right up into places like central and southern Turkey, where, oh look, we've got the big old huge stone T-shaped objects, which are calendars more or less, over at Göbekli Tepe. No aliens! People were using and making calendars to make it easier for them to hunt before they used these things to start getting a better track of the seasons, which developed agriculture, and with the development of agriculture, more permanent civilizations and settlements, where the different city-states rose up and became national cultures. Again, no mystery, no aliens, no BS. We also know from a lot of the finds and fossils that a lot of the people do trace to the same genetic links, and let's face it, we now have artifacts that we now have confirmed scientifically that when people spread out from places like Africa into Europe and Asia, hence Eurasia, they were creating the same damn rock art and cave paintings and spray painting their hands with red ochre in two different far-reaching countries, from the far north to the far east. Not that far out. No aliens involved. No bald-headed, bug-eyed, gray thing that some androgynous or hermaphrodite midget, pardon the people who are small people, but let's face it, that whole concept didn't even start until 1917 with the drawing of Aleister Crowley recirculated during sci-fi shock seasons of the 1960s by way of Kenneth Grant, who is Aleister Crowley's occult love partner. And bottom line, it's all bullshit. So there's no aliens, there's a better perspective of things, and it's not anti-Jewish anything. It's actually cutting through the crap and just looking at what the actual artifacts say. Once you understand the mythology, culture, and spirituality of people of those periods of time, you know who the gods are, their ancestors, and it wasn't uncommon to name celestial bodies or even dates of the season after said famous rulers. Thank you very much. Talisman Skulls, signing off.